Hello, you guys. We are going to do 1-2A today, and what you're looking at in front of you is the PDF that is linked in Canvas. So if you want to take notes along with me on the PDF, go ahead and pull that up or print it up right now. But we're going to whip through. This is a lot of terms today, just to get you understanding the different things that we're going to be working with all year. So these are important, but it's not a lot of like numbers and solving and things like that. So here we go. First thing, a point. A point is just a location. It's something that doesn't have any size. And the way we write a point is a little dot with a capital letter next to it. So we would say this point A. So it's just a location, point A. A line is a straight path that extends in two opposite directions with no end. So what we are going to do with a line, let me just draw one for you here. You have, let's say, a point here we'll call A, a point here we'll call B, and then sometimes they put a cursive L or a cursive M or N next to it over there. This is a line, and it is just a bunch of points all put together. Essentially, there is an infinite number of points on this line, so points, 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 points all the way across it. Usually they will highlight a few. So in this case, there's an A and there's a B. We would call this line AB, and you put the arrows over top of it going both directions because a line keeps going in both directions. Or the other way you could name this line would be line BA. So it doesn't matter the order you put the letters in. It does matter when you're naming a line that you only use 2 points to name it. Okay, so even if there was a C right here, I wouldn't name that ACB. Okay, I could name it AC because the line goes on forever. It's going to go through B also. Or CA would be fine. And then the other way you could name this is you could call it line L because they gave us this little L right next to it. Okay, so a line is named with 2 letters, and it doesn't matter the order of those 2 letters. I typically just go in alphabetical order, but you don't have to. All right, next term is plane, and feel free, you guys, pause me. If you need to keep writing and I'm going too fast, you can rewind. I'm just going to try to move fairly quickly for those that need the quick. But if you need to slow down, you are in control. Go ahead and pause, rewind, fast forward, however you need to do that. Okay. Okay, a plane. This is a flat surface that extends without an end, and it has no thickness to it. For instance, I usually use a piece of paper to show you, like this is kind of what a plane is, but even a paper is too thick because a plane does not have any thickness. The way we typically draw a plane is with a parallelogram like this. So let's say on this plane, I give you point A, point B, point C, and then the letter P, okay? Actually, let's give you one more. We'll do point D also. So there is an infinite number of lines that goes through this plane because a plane goes on forever. So even though we drew it like a parallelogram, it's just going to keep going in every direction. Now, when you name a plane, there's a couple ways you can do it. The first is, if you notice here, this P doesn't have a point in front of it. We would call that plane P. So if there's no point there, you can name it with just the letter that is representing the whole plane. Most of the time, however, you will name a plane with the points that are on the plane. So we have, for instance, A, B, C, and D are all points. You only need 3 points, as long as they're not in a straight line, to name a plane. So if I said this is plane ABC, okay, that would work. Or plane BCD would work. You can also do more points than that. You can say this is plane ABCD, and that's just fine. But you only need 3, okay? Maybe just make a note of that. You need 3 points not in a straight line. The reason they can't be in a straight line is if they were in a line, let's say, for instance, okay, let's say this is the line we're talking about, and there's a point right in the middle of it, so I called this plane AED. If that was AED, I could draw a vertical plane through those 3 points also, and then I don't know, am I talking about the horizontal plane or am I talking about the vertical plane? So pick 3 points that don't lie in a straight line and you're good. Okay, speaking of lying in a straight line, this collinear points, you see the word line in there, right? Collinear. That's points that lie on the same line. So if I have this, okay, and I gave you these 3 points, we would say those are collinear. Now, if I threw in a 4th point right here, and I was saying of those 4 points, those are considered non-collinear. So collinear, they're on the same line. Non-collinear, they are not on the same line. Okay, same thing goes for coplanar. This is points that lie on the same plane. So if I gave you these 3 points, we would say those are coplanar points. But if I threw in this other point way down here that's not on the plane, then we would say those are non-coplanar points. So as long as they lie on the same plane, they are coplanar. Okay? Okay, so a lot of what you're going to do with today's lesson are questions like this. So this first example, it says, what are 2 other ways to name line QT? Remember when these arrows are over top, we say that's a line because it keeps going. So line QT, that's this one right here, right? Line QT. Another way that you could name that would be line QN. Okay, it's the exact same line because the arrows mean we keep going, so it's just going to keep going through T, but we're naming it line QN. And maybe you then could come up with the third one. I'll give you a second to think about that. Right, line NT would be your other one. And if you say NQ or TN, that's the same naming, just in different order. So you want to pick different points, not just flip the order of your letters. Okay. Okay, then it asks for 2 ways to name plane P. And if you look at the picture, plane P is that like greenish, yellowish plane. Okay, and we said you need at least 3 letters that are not in a straight line to name it. So we could call this plane RQV would work. Okay, or we could call it plane SRV. Okay, or you could call it plane RQSV. You cannot use point P as a point because it's not a point. Notice there's no little dot in front of that, so don't use P if you're using multiple letters. Okay. All right, then it asks for an example of 3 collinear points. And if you recall, collinear means they're on the same line. So you could do these 3, or you could do these 3. Either one of those would work. So 3 collinear points, I would say R, Q, and S are collinear. Okay, then it asks for 4 coplanar points. And this one can be a little bit tricky. There's a very quick, like the simplest answer is very quick. You could say R, Q, S, and V. But you could also say that T, Q, N, and R are coplanar. Now, it's not the plane that you're looking at. It would be a vertical plane instead. But if you have 3 points in a line vertically, I'm totally talking with my hands over here and you guys can't see it. 3 points in a line vertically, and you went out from that, you could go through R, or you could go through S, or you could even go through V, okay? So just be aware of that there are other options than maybe just the first one that you would think you would see. Okay. How we doing? Hopefully we're cruising right along. And again, if you guys have any questions, please email me or sign up for a time on Fridays to come in and see me. I would love to see your beautiful faces. Yeah, don't hesitate to ask for help. That's what I'm here for. All right. Moving on. Space. When they talk about space, they're not talking about outer space. They're talking about the set of points in 3 dimensions. So we're thinking 3-dimensionally when we talk space. If they're saying in a plane, they're talking 2-dimensionally. So just keep in mind, space is 3-dimensional. Okay. All right, we're almost there. Segment. This is part of a line, and it has 2 endpoints and all the points between them. So a line keeps going. A segment does not. So you would have like A and B. And our segment here, we would name segment AB. Notice I didn't put the arrows over top because it's a part of a line. It doesn't keep going, okay? The other way you could name this segment is segment BA. Okay, so either way, you just flip those letters around and it's the same thing. Okay, then array. This is a part of a line that has 1 endpoint and then all the points that are on one side of that endpoint. So if I give you something like this, where I have an endpoint here, and we'll call that point A, and then I have a point over here, we'll call that X. Notice on one side, it's an endpoint. On the other side, it's an arrow, keeps going. The way you name array, and this is important because you cannot flip these around like you can with a segment or a line, you would name it endpoint first and then the point it goes through, and it's always an arrow to the right. So this would be ray AX. You could not call this ray XA. That's not the same thing, okay? Or maybe you do like this. If this is L and this is P, okay? I could name this endpoint first and then the point we go through and the arrow to the right. So that's ray LP. It is not ray PL, okay? All right, last term. Opposite rays are 2 rays that share an endpoint, and then they form a line going in opposite directions. So an opposite ray, or 2 opposite rays, would look like this. Let's say we have a C here, but then there's an A and there's a B, okay? Our opposite rays here have to be ray CB and ray CA, okay? This letter, the first letter on both of them would have to be the same if they're potentially going to be opposite rays. So CB and CA, those are the only opposite rays in that picture, okay? All right, last example, and then you can get to the homework. On this one, it says name the segments. Well, in this picture, there is segment EF. So you do EF with just the bar over top. There is segment ED or DE, and you can do either one of those, ED or DE. You don't need to do both. And then the last segment would be if we did the bigger one, so segment DF or segment FD. But again, you don't need to name it both ways. You just need to get every different chunk that you have. Okay, so those would be your segments. The rays would be, if we start at D. Now here's the thing, if you start at D and you go this way, you could call it ray DE, or you could call it ray DF, but it's the exact same ray. So you don't need DE and DF, okay? Second one, if you start at E, you could go this way. That would be ray ED. Or if you start at E and go to the right, that would be ray EF. Okay, and then the last one that you have, if you start at F and you go this way, you could call it FE or FD. And again, it doesn't matter, they're the same ray. So FE is fine or FD is fine. Okay, then opposite rays. So kind of made a mess of our line here. We have D, E, and F. Our opposite rays have to share a point, and the only point you can share and go in opposite directions is E. So when you name your opposite rays here, you're going to start at E for both of them. So ED would be one, arrow always points to the right, and then EF would be the other one, arrow to the right. So EF and ED, okay? Then notice what it asks. Are EF and FE opposite rays? Well, EF is this, FE is that. They don't share an endpoint. They have some overlap here, which you can't overlap. They have to go in opposite directions. So we would say no. They don't share an endpoint would be reason enough. Let's fix that. An endpoint. Okay, so you have some bookwork to do, and that's it. Happy weekend.